My son was standing outside my iron gate at 11:57 in the morning, gripping the bars with both hands like a man begging to be let into a prison. Only the prison was mine. The gate was mine. The house behind it was mine. The land under his polished shoes was mine. And the $126,000 I had paid for him less than 24 hours earlier had just become the rope tightening around his own neck. "Dad," Brian said, his voice cracking, "please, open the gate. Please. We can fix this before it gets worse." His wife, Denise, stood 3 steps behind him with her arms folded across her cream-colored sweater. She was trying to look calm, practical, and concerned. Denise always knew how to wear concern like jewelry, polished on the outside, cold underneath. At sunrise, that same woman had spoken to me through my own gate intercom and said, "Walter, this is for your safety. You've been confused lately. Brian and I are taking over until your condition is properly reviewed." My condition. Not my grief. Not my age. Not my loneliness. My condition. Brian had stood behind her then, too. My only son, 52 years old. The boy I had once taught to hold a hammer without smashing his thumb. The boy who used to run across job sites with sawdust on his shoes, telling every carpenter there, "My dad built this." That morning, he would not even look into the gate camera. He would not say, "Dad, this is wrong." He would not say, "Open the gate and let my father into his own home." He stood there like silence had paid him. I did not yell. I did not argue. I did not beg a man I had raised to remember who bought his first truck, who taught him how to read a level, who sat beside his mother's hospital bed with him, who had written checks over the years and swallowed disappointment quietly so he would not feel like a failure. I simply stood outside my own gate with my late wife's blue notebook in my coat pocket and watched my son let his wife lock me out of the house his mother had died in. By noon, he was begging at that same gate. Not because he suddenly found his conscience, because my attorney had arrived, because the bank had called, because the locksmith had talked, because the county clerk had confirmed what Brian thought I would never find, because my neighbor's camera had seen what Denise thought darkness would hide, and because my wife, Elaine, had prepared for a betrayal I was too much of a father to believe. Before I tell you how they learned what my silence really meant, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever had to stand up to an ungrateful family member without losing your dignity, hit the like button and subscribe. To understand how we got there, you have to go back to the night before, when my son sat at my kitchen table with his head in his hands and told me he was about to lose everything. Brian had not looked that small in years. He was 52, broad-shouldered, dressed well, with the kind of tired face men get when they have been lying to themselves longer than they have been lying to everyone else. His construction company was failing, he said. Vendors were threatening lawsuits. A short-term lender was calling every day. Payroll was behind. Taxes were past due. Equipment payments had stacked up. The number was $126,000. He said it slowly, like each digit hurt him. Denise sat beside him, still and composed, her hands folded on the table. She had brought a folder. Of course she had. Denise never arrived at a crisis empty-handed. She placed invoices, letters, and statements in front of me like evidence in a courtroom. Some of them were real. Some of them were dressed up. Some of them were bait. I would learn that later. That night, I only saw my son. "Dad," Brian said. I messed up. I had heard those words before. When he was 17 and backed my pickup into a fence. When he was 24 and quit a good apprenticeship because he thought he could start at the top. When he was 36 and asked me to help refinance a house he had already borrowed too much against. But this time, his voice had weight. His eyes were red. His hands shook around the coffee cup Elaine used to give him when he visited on cold mornings. That cup almost broke me. It was dark blue with a chipped handle. Elaine had bought it at a roadside pottery shop in Vermont on our 35th anniversary trip. Brian had always reached for it when he came home. She used to say, "That cup knows your hand." After Elaine died, I left it in the cabinet and rarely touched it. That night, Brian used it like a passport back into my heart. If Mom were here, he said, she'd help me. There it was, the sentence he knew would reach me. Denise lowered her eyes at the perfect moment. Not too much, just enough to suggest sorrow. I looked away from them and toward the window over the sink. The glass was dark, and for 1 second I saw Elaine reflected there in memory. Not the thin woman cancer left behind, but the strong woman who stood beside me for 48 years. Red scarf tied around her hair, pencil behind one ear, ledger open on the counter. Elaine was the reason I had anything worth stealing. I built houses. She built order. I framed walls. She read contracts. I hired crews. She checked invoices. I came home with cracked hands and sawdust in my sleeves, and she would be waiting at the kitchen table with receipts sorted by date and bank statements marked in her neat handwriting. I used to tease her for keeping every scrap of paper. She would smile and say, "A man can build with his hands, Walter, but he keeps what he built with records." I did not know how holy that sentence was until after she died. Brian leaned closer. "I'm not asking because I think I deserve it," he said. "I'm asking because I don't know where else to go." That hurt because there had been a time when he truly did come to me for guidance, not rescue. I remembered him at 8 years old, standing beside me in a freezing rain while we repaired a porch roof for a widow on Maple Street. His little fingers were red from holding nails, but he refused to sit in the truck. "I'm helping you, Dad," he kept saying. I remembered him at 15, trying to carry a sheet of plywood twice his size and getting knocked flat by the wind. He jumped up laughing and said, "Don't tell Mom." I remembered him as a grown man in the hospital after Elaine's first surgery. I found him asleep in a chair beside her bed, one hand resting near hers on the blanket. He had brought her a violet in a clay pot because she hated cut flowers in hospitals. And I remembered him at her funeral, standing beside me under a gray sky, whispering, "I'll look after you, Dad." A father remembers promises even after the son forgets making them. So I said, "I'll help." Brian exhaled like a man pulled out of deep water. Denise reached over and touched his arm. Then she looked at me and said, "Walter, you have no idea what this means to us." That was one of Denise's talents. She said warm words, without giving them warmth. I looked at the folder. "I'll help," I repeated. "But I won't write a personal check tonight. Caldwell will handle the transfer through his office in the morning." Denise's face did not change much. Only half a second. Her smile stayed in place, but something behind her eyes tightened. "Your attorney?" she asked. "Yes. Is that necessary? We're family." I looked straight at her. "Exactly." Brian shifted in his chair. "Dad, come on. We don't need to make it formal." "Yes," I said. "We do." Denise softened her voice. "Walter, no one is trying to take advantage of you. We are just trying to keep this family from falling apart." That was the first time she used the word family as a tool that night. Not as love. As leverage. I did not answer. Old men are quiet for a reason. After they left, I remained at the kitchen table for nearly an hour. The house settled around me with all its familiar sounds. The refrigerator hummed. The hallway clock ticked. Wind moved gently against the porch screens. Elaine's chair sat across from me, empty but not silent. People think grief makes a man weak. They are wrong. Grief makes a man tired. It makes him lonely. It makes him slow to trust joy. But grief also teaches him to listen to rooms after everyone has left. That night, I went to Elaine's nightstand and opened the second drawer. Inside was the small blue notebook she had left for me before she died. She had pressed it into my hand 3 weeks before the end, when the hospice nurse had stepped into the hall and the house smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender lotion. "Don't open it unless you need more than memories," she told me. At the time, I thought she meant funeral instructions. I was wrong. I had opened it once after she passed, but I could not finish. Her handwriting nearly took the breath out of me. That night, after Brian and Denise left, I opened it again. The first pages were ordinary. Insurance names, contractor numbers, account reminders, which plumber overcharged, Which tax clerk was helpful? Which drawer held the original deed copies? Then the notes changed. Denise asked again who gets the house if Walter becomes unable to manage himself. A few pages later, Brian used phrase, protect the family structure, not his wording. Denise used same phrase on phone. Then, mail from county tax office missing. Walter did not see it. Watch this. And finally, underlined twice. If they ever try to make you look incompetent, do not defend yourself with words. Use records. I sat there with my thumb on that sentence until the house blurred around me. Elaine had seen the shape of the threat before I allowed myself to admit there was one. The next morning, before Brian arrived at Caldwell's office, I met privately with Arthur Caldwell. Caldwell was 76 years old, thin as a fence rail, silver-haired, precise, and impossible to rush. He had been our attorney for more than 30 years. He had handled property purchases, tenant disputes, trust documents, contractor liens, and the estate plan Elaine insisted on updating after her diagnosis. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Caldwell had already known something was wrong. That is important. He was not starting from nothing that morning. Elaine had given him copies of her concerns 2 years earlier. The cognitive evaluation, the trust amendment, the notes about Denise asking questions, the concern about mail. At the time, Caldwell had filed it all quietly and told Elaine he hoped it would never be needed. So when I placed Brian's folder on his desk, he did not look surprised. He looked prepared. He read each page carefully. After 15 minutes, he said, "Some of this debt is real." "Some?" He tapped the first stack. "Vendor balances, equipment note, tax issue. These are legitimate business obligations." Then he tapped another stack. "These credit lines are personal. This one appears connected to household expenses. This lender is real, but the amount does not match the company records I can access publicly. How much is business debt? Rough estimate? 71,000, maybe 75. And the rest? Personal spending disguised as emergency." I leaned back. Brian had lied, but not completely. That made it worse. Complete lies are easier to reject. Half-truths come dressed in familiar clothes. "Do you still want to help him?" Caldwell asked. I looked down at my hands. The knuckles were thick from 45 years of work. There were scars there Brian knew by story. One from a table saw, one from a roofing nail, one from the day he dropped a brick as a child and cried harder than I did because he thought he had ruined my hand forever. "Yes," I said, "I want to help him." Caldwell studied me. "As a gift?" "No." A faint smile moved across his face. "Elaine would be pleased. We drafted a conditional family loan agreement. Plain language. Legal backbone. $126,000 would be paid directly to verified creditors. Brian would acknowledge that the funds were a loan, not a gift. Repayment would be deferred for 1 year unless he violated certain terms. He could not interfere with my residence. He could not change locks, gate codes, or access systems. He could not represent himself as caretaker, successor, trustee, owner, or authorized agent. He could not redirect my mail. He could not access or attempt to access my accounts. He could not use the payment as evidence that I was financially incompetent. He could not initiate guardianship, conservatorship, power of attorney changes, deed transfers, trustee changes, or medical authority claims without proper medical and legal basis. If he violated those terms, the loan became immediately due. Caldwell also made one quiet call to my bank before the transfer went out, not to accuse anyone, just to place a senior account note requiring additional verification for online access changes, authorized user requests, and password resets. That was why the bank caught the first attempt so quickly. That was why the timeline worked by noon. Elaine had prepared. Caldwell had prepared. And for once, I had listened before it was too late. Brian arrived at 10:45. Denise came with him. Caldwell explained the agreement. Brian's face reddened. Denise's expression settled into wounded politeness. "This feels very formal," she said. Caldwell looked at her over his glasses. "It is formal. We're not strangers. No, he said. That is why clarity matters. Brian skimmed the pages too fast. Men who think love will protect them from consequences often do not read what consequences look like. He signed. Denise did not sign, but her eyes moved across the page like she was looking for traps. She missed the important ones because she was looking for greed, not discipline. The funds went out that afternoon. Direct payments, verified accounts, copied receipts. $126,000. At 5:13, Brian texted me. Thank you, Dad. I know this was hard. I'll make it right. At 5:27, Denise texted. This gives everyone breathing room. We should talk soon about a long-term plan for your care and the property. The property. Not your health. Not your grief. Not thank you. The property. I did not respond. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery before sunrise. Elaine's grave sat beneath a maple tree on the west side, near the low stone wall she used to admire when we walked there after church. I brought yellow roses because she said red roses made daily love look too dramatic. I told her about Brian. I told her I had helped him. Then I told her I had done it through Caldwell. The wind moved through the maple leaves. For 1 second, I imagined her saying, "Good." When I came home at 7:12, my gate code did not work. I entered it again. Nothing. I pressed the garage remote. Nothing. I tried the side pedestrian gate with my key. The lock had been changed. I stood very still. Not because I was confused. Because stillness helps a man separate feeling from fact. Then the intercom clicked. Denise's voice came through smooth and controlled. Walter, please don't be upset. The camera above the brick column stared at me. My camera. My gate. My home. I looked into the lens. Open the gate, Denise. I'm afraid we can't do that right now. We? Brian and I. I saw movement behind the small window near the gatehouse. Brian was there in a navy jacket, arms hanging at his sides like they belonged to someone else. Denise continued, This is for your safety. There have been concerns. You've been forgetful. You made a very impulsive financial decision yesterday. We think it's best if we take over temporarily until your mental condition is properly reviewed. I looked at my son, Brian. He stepped forward, then stopped. Dad, he said, barely above a whisper, don't make this harder. That sentence closed something inside me. Not love. Love is stubborn, even when it is wounded. But expectation. The belief that one more chance will turn a man back into the boy you raised. That morning, expectation closed like a door. I did not yell. I did not argue. I said absolutely nothing. Denise kept talking. She used words like transition, care, safety, stability, family structure. She made theft sound like paperwork and betrayal sound like concern. I walked back to my truck, opened the glove box, removed Elaine's notebook copies and Caldwell's loan agreement, and called my attorney. Caldwell answered on the second ring. I said, Elaine was right. They changed the locks. He did not ask who. He did not ask why. He said, do not enter. Do not threaten. Take photographs. Stay where you are. I am coming. Then he paused. Walter? Yes. Say nothing to them. I already did. While I waited, I photographed the keypad, the changed lock, the disabled side gate, and the typed note taped inside the bars. Dad, this is for your safety. Please cooperate. We are protecting the family and your future. No signature. Cowards avoid signatures when they know paper matters. At 8:03, my phone buzzed. Bank alert. Password reset attempt blocked. It was for my operating account, the one connected to rental deposits and property expenses. The location tag showed Brian's side of town. That was the first evidence drop of the morning. At 8:20, my neighbor Henry Keene pulled up behind my truck in his old Ford. Henry was 81, wore suspenders every day, and trusted no one who backed into a driveway. He rolled down his window and stared at the gate. You locked out of your own place, Walter? Looks that way. He scratched his jaw. My side camera caught Denise's SUV coming in before 6. Thought it was strange. What time? 5:42. Lights off before she reached the gate. And Brian? Later. Around 6:30. That was the second evidence drop. Denise planned the lockout before I even left the cemetery. Not after an argument. Not after confusion. Before dawn. Henry reached into his glove box. I pulled the footage onto a drive. Elaine told me once, if things ever got strange around your place, I should keep my cameras working. I looked at him. Elaine told you that? His face softened. She worried more than she told you. Grief had not made me stupid, but love had made me late. Caldwell arrived at 8:40 in a dark sedan with his assistant Marla beside him. Marla was a notary and former library board friend of Elaine's. She had a calm face and a tablet already open. Caldwell looked at the gate, the note, the lock, then at me. Have you spoken to them? Only to ask them to open it. Good. He pressed the intercom. Denise answered. Walter, I told you. This is Arthur Caldwell, attorney for Walter Hayes. Please open the gate. Silence. Then Denise said, Mr. Caldwell, this is a family health matter. No, Caldwell said. It is currently an access interference matter, a property matter, and possibly a financial exploitation matter. Open the gate. Brian's voice sounded faintly behind her. Denise, maybe we should just let him. She covered the microphone too late. Caldwell heard it. So did I. Denise came back. We are not comfortable letting Walter in until there is a review. By whom? Our family doctor. Name? She hesitated. Caldwell wrote something down. I will ask once more, he said. Open the gate. She did not. That refusal became the third piece of evidence, recorded with time and date. Some lessons are not taught with anger. Some lessons are taught with paperwork. By 9:15, Caldwell had contacted the locksmith. Because of the senior protection note already placed in my file the day before, he knew exactly what to request and how to request it. The invoice arrived at 9:27. Authorized by Brian Hayes, acting property successor and caretaker. Caldwell turned the phone toward me. Caretaker. Property successor. Two titles Brian did not have. Two titles he had claimed less than 24 hours after signing a document promising he would not do exactly that. Caldwell said quietly, That alone triggers default. I looked toward the house. Inside the front window, Denise moved past carrying a small wooden box. My breath caught. Elaine's sewing box. Dark walnut lid, brass corners. A little scratch near the handle from the year Brian, at age 11, used it as a step stool to reach cookies Elaine had hidden above the pantry. I took one step forward. Caldwell put out his hand. Walter. I stopped. Anger is a tool, but only if you hold the handle. Grab the blade and you bleed. I took a photograph. At 9:42, Marla received confirmation from the county clerk's office. Caldwell had asked her to check for guardianship or conservatorship inquiries, because Elaine's notes had specifically warned about that direction. Marla looked at Caldwell first. Then, at me. Caldwell's voice lowered. Brian submitted a preliminary guardianship inquiry last week. The words entered me slowly. A what? Not a full petition, an inquiry packet, but it included a statement of concern. Signed by Denise? Caldwell shook his head. Brian. That was when the morning became something else. Until then, I had kept one small candle burning inside me. Maybe Brian was weak. Maybe Denise had pushed him. Maybe he was ashamed and trapped and letting things happen because he did not have the spine to stop her. But a signature is not silence. A signature is a choice. Caldwell showed me the scanned page. Brian Hayes. My son's name. My son's hand. He claimed I had memory lapses. He claimed I repeated conversations. He claimed I had made unsafe financial decisions. Unsafe. Like paying his debt. He had used my help as evidence against me. I turned away from the gate. For the first time that morning, my eyes burned. Not with rage. With recognition. I remembered Brian at 12, sitting with Elaine in the garden, planting the first row of yellow roses along the side fence. He had dug the holes too shallow, and she had corrected him gently. He told her, "When Dad gets old, I'll keep these alive for him." That boy had promised to protect the garden. That man had signed papers to take the house. They thought I was broken. They forgot who built everything. At 10 o'clock, Caldwell removed the cognitive evaluation from his briefcase. Elaine had arranged it 2 years earlier after a minor health scare. I had been dehydrated, stubborn, and annoyed. She insisted I see Dr. Stephen Marks for a full evaluation. I thought she was worried about my health. Now I understood. She had seen Denise circling the word incompetent before anyone dared speak it aloud. The report was clear. Walter Hayes is mentally competent, financially capable, fully oriented, and able to manage personal, legal, and business affairs. Caldwell placed it in the file. This destroys the medical narrative. I looked at Elaine's notebook in my hand. She knew. "Yes," Caldwell said. "She didn't tell me everything. She knew you loved Brian." That was true. Love can make a man defend someone who is already loading the gun. At 10:14, the bank called. The password reset attempt was not the only issue. Someone had tried to add Brian as an authorized user to one of my property accounts using personal information only family would know. My birth date, the last 4 digits of my social security number, Elaine's maiden name. The attempt had started at 6:14 that morning. 6:14. While I was at Elaine's grave. They did not even wait until the roses were in the dirt. At 10:26, Henry returned with the thumb drive. Denise's SUV at 5:42. Brian's truck at 6:28. Locksmith van at 6:36. Boxes carried from the side porch at 6:50. One box was Elaine's sewing box. Another looked like my deed safe. That was the 4th evidence drop. Caldwell watched the footage without expression. Then he said, "We need a deputy present before the meeting." I nodded. At 10:45, my phone buzzed. "Brian. Dad, please don't escalate this. Denise is trying to help. You scared us yesterday with the transfer. It proved you can be pressured." I stared at those words. Then another message came. "Maybe it is time to admit you are tired." Caldwell read it. "Send 1 sentence," he said. I typed, "Maybe you are right. Maybe I am tired. We can talk at noon." Denise took the bait. At 10:53, a message came from Brian's phone. "Good. Stay calm. If you agree to temporary control, this can remain private. No one wants court involvement." Brian never used semicolons. I handed the phone to Caldwell. He nodded. "Do not answer." At 11:02, Denise accidentally texted from her own number. "Keep him calm until Caldwell leaves. Once Walter agrees to temporary authority, the property transfer will be easier." She deleted it 30 seconds later. But phones are faster than guilt. I had already taken a screenshot. That was the 5th evidence drop. At 11:12, Marla found the mail forwarding request. Submitted online 2 weeks earlier. My bank statements, county tax notices, insurance notices, and property correspondence had been redirected to Brian's business office. Some institutions had blocked it. Others had flagged it. But the attempt was documented. Now I understood how Denise had mentioned my tax assessment at dinner 3 weeks earlier and then smiled when I asked how she knew. "Oh, Walter," she had said, "people talk." No. Paper had talked. They had tried to blind me before they tried to move me. An old man without mail is an old man without warning. At 11:20, Caldwell called a realtor he knew in town. Because Denise had used a local office, the answer came fast. By 11:31, we had confirmation. Denise had requested a quiet valuation of my property 3 days before Brian came crying at my kitchen table. Her message read, "Older owner. Family transition likely soon. Need fast number before listing discussion. Before the debt. Before the tears. Before Brian held Elaine's blue cup like a memory. The house had always been the target. The debt was just the door." At 11:45, Deputy Willis arrived. He did not come with sirens or drama. He was a calm man with a notebook and a face that had seen enough family disputes To know the quiet ones can be the ugliest. Caldwell showed him the documents, the lock invoice, the bank alerts, the mail forwarding request, the guardianship inquiry, the neighbor footage, the text messages. Deputy Willis said, "I'll document the access issue and keep the peace." At 11:52, Caldwell pressed the intercom. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, we are prepared to discuss this at the gate." Denise answered, "Walter can come inside if he stays calm." Caldwell looked at me. I shook my head. "No," Caldwell said, "the meeting will occur here." And at 11:57, Brian came to the gate, the same gate he had locked me out of that morning. His hands wrapped around the bars. "Dad," he said, "please open the gate. We can fix this." Denise stood behind him, still trying to look like the adult in the room. Caldwell opened his briefcase. "Brian," he said, "before your father responds, I need you to understand the current position." Brian swallowed. "This is family, Mr. Caldwell." "No," Caldwell said. "This became legal when you changed access to property you do not own, represented yourself as caretaker and property successor, submitted a guardianship inquiry, redirected mail, attempted bank access, and interfered with your father's residence less than 24 hours after signing a conditional loan agreement." Denise stepped forward. "That is a gross mischaracterization. We were trying to protect him." Caldwell turned one page. Locksmith invoice. Another page. Bank access attempt. Another. Mail forwarding request. Another. Guardianship inquiry signed by Brian. Another. Realtor valuation request sent by you 3 days before the debt payment. Brian turned his head. "What realtor valuation?" Denise's jaw tightened. Caldwell continued. "Neighbor camera footage." Another page. Text message from your number at 11:02. Another page. Deleted text message regarding temporary authority and property transfer. Denise's face lost color one layer at a time. Brian looked at her again. "What valuation, Denise?" She said nothing. That was when he realized she had been running ahead of him. But I did not pity him. He had signed his name. Caldwell looked at Brian. "The agreement you signed yesterday states clearly that any interference with Walter Hayes's residence, accounts, mail, medical independence, legal autonomy, or property access creates immediate default. The $126,000 is now due." Brian's hands slipped down the bars. "Due?" "Immediately." "Dad," he said, turning to me, "you can't do that." I looked at him for a long moment. I saw the boy in the rain holding nails. I saw the teenager laughing under a sheet of plywood. I saw the man asleep beside Elaine's hospital bed. Then I saw his signature on a document calling me incompetent. "You did that," I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle. That seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. Denise snapped. "A father does not sue his son for accepting help." Caldwell said, "A son does not lock his father out of his home the morning after receiving that help." Deputy Willis wrote something in his notebook. Denise noticed and softened instantly. "Walter," she said, turning toward me with moist eyes that came too late. "No one wants to hurt you. We're trying to keep your life stable. You've been alone. You're grieving. Sometimes people who are grieving make decisions they would not normally make." That was Denise at her most dangerous. Not cruel. Reasonable. Soft. Almost kind. She knew open greed repels people. False concern invites them to doubt themselves. I said nothing. Caldwell lifted Elaine's cognitive evaluation. Dr. Stephen Marks evaluated Walter Hayes and found him fully competent to manage financial, legal, and personal matters. Denise said, "That report is 2 years old. We can obtain a current evaluation today," Caldwell replied. "Are you willing to put your allegation of incapacity in a sworn statement?" Her mouth opened. No words came. Caldwell looked at Brian. "Are you?" Brian stared at the ground. Old men are quiet for a reason. Sometimes silence lets another man hear the size of his own lie. Then Caldwell removed the final document. The trust amendment. Elaine's wall. Years before she died, after Denise had asked too many questions about deeds, incapacity, and simplifying succession, Elaine and I amended the family trust. I had argued against it. I told her, Brian would never try to remove me from my own home. Elaine placed her hand over mine and said, then the clause will never matter. At noon, it mattered. Caldwell read it clearly. Any beneficiary or successor trustee who attempts to remove Walter Hayes from his primary residence, interfere with his mail, accounts, medical independence, legal authority, or property access, or initiate incompetence claims without verified medical basis, shall be automatically removed as successor trustee and disinherited from trust assets. Brian stared at him. Denise whispered, that can't be enforceable. It is enforceable, Caldwell said. You can't just remove us. Walter is not removing you, Caldwell said. Your actions triggered the provision. Brian gripped the gate again. Dad, please. There it was. The begging. Not when I stood outside the gate at sunrise. Not when he signed the guardianship inquiry. Not when he let his wife carry Elaine's sewing box across my dining room. Only now. Only when consequence had witnesses, documents, clauses, and his mother's handwriting behind it. Dad, he said again, softer. I didn't understand all of it. I believe that. But not enough. You understood the gate, I said. He flinched. You understood the locks. His eyes filled. You understood your signature. Denise grabbed his arm. Brian, stop talking. He pulled away from her. That was the first honest thing he had done all morning. What realtor valuation? He asked again. She lifted her chin. I was trying to protect our future. Our future? Brian said. This family's future. Caldwell looked at me. We both heard it. Family structure. Family future. Property transfer. The language of people who want theft to sound responsible. Deputy Willis asked Denise whether she had removed items from the house. She said, only for safekeeping. What items? Documents. Personal effects. My wife's sewing box, I said. Denise looked at me without pretending kindness now. It was just sitting there, Walter. It sat there for 46 years without your help. The deputy wrote that down too. Caldwell said, those items will be returned immediately. No documents leave the property. No financial institution is to be contacted on Walter's behalf. No medical, legal, or property authority is to be claimed. The gate will be open now, and a locksmith will restore Mr. Hayes's access today. If access continues to be denied, Deputy Willis will document refusal, and we will proceed with emergency relief. Denise wanted to fight. I saw her pride looking for a bridge. But there was no bridge. Only paperwork. Brian pressed the release from inside. The gate clicked. Then slowly it opened. A gate opening can sound like many things. That day, it sounded like a verdict. I walked through first. Not fast. Not triumphant. Just steady. A man returning to his own porch. Brian stepped aside. Denise did not. Caldwell said, Mrs. Hayes. She moved. Inside, the house had been disturbed, not ransacked. Denise was too smart for that. But drawers had been opened. My desk files shifted. The deed safe sat on the dining table, with fresh scratch marks near the lock. Elaine's sewing box sat beside it. I placed my hand on the walnut lid. For one foolish second, I expected Elaine's hand to cover mine. Denise said, we were organizing. I did not turn around. No, I said. You were searching. Marla documented every room. Deputy Willis witnessed the returned keys. The bank representative confirmed by phone that fraud flags were placed on every account and that Brian was blocked from being added without in-person verification. And my written instruction. Caldwell gave Brian the legal position clearly. The $126,000 was in default and immediately repayable. A formal demand letter would be issued. Brian's business assets could be lined if repayment terms were not arranged. The guardianship inquiry would be answered with medical documentation and evidence of bad faith. The mail forwarding attempt would be reported. The bank access attempts would remain on fraud record. Denise was not to contact any financial institution, county office, realtor, locksmith, doctor, or attorney claiming authority over me. Brian was removed as successor trustee. Brian was removed as trust beneficiary. Neither Brian nor Denise had any right to enter the property without my permission. That was the legal hammer. Not loud, not theatrical, but final. Denise sat at my kitchen table, the same place she had sat the night before while my son begged for money. She looked smaller there. Not sorry, just cornered. Brian stood by the sink, staring at the floor. After everything was documented, Caldwell asked, "Walter, do you want them removed from the property now?" I looked at my son. He raised his eyes. For a moment, I saw the boy again. Then I saw the man. Those are not the same person, though fathers spend years pretending they are. "You have 10 minutes, I said. "Take only what you brought in. Nothing that belonged to your mother. Nothing from my office. Nothing from this house." Brian nodded. Denise said, "Walter, you are making a permanent decision during an emotional moment." I almost laughed. Almost. But I had not survived recessions, lawsuits, bad tenants, broken bones, cancer wards, funeral silence, and 14 months of eating dinner alone to be lectured by a woman who changed my locks before breakfast. "No, Denise," I said. "You made the emotional decision. I am making the documented one." Her mouth tightened. Brian whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry." I wanted those words to do more. I wanted them to open something. They did not. "Sorry is what you say when you break a dish," I told him. "You tried to break my life." He cried then. Quietly. I looked away. Not because I was unmoved. Because I was. That is the cruelty of betrayal by your child. You can protect yourself from the man and still ache for the boy. By 1:15, they were gone. By 2, the locksmith had restored every lock and access code. By 3, the bank had frozen every questionable channel. By 4, Caldwell had filed notices preserving evidence and warning against further interference. By 5, I was sitting alone in Elaine's garden with her blue notebook open on my lap. Near the back was a page I had not read before. "Walter, if you are reading this because something happened with Brian, do not let your heart make you foolish. Our son has good in him, but good can be buried under weakness, and weakness becomes dangerous when it marries ambition. Protect the house, not because walls matter more than blood, because this house is the proof of our life. Do not let anyone use your loneliness as a key." I read that last line 3 times. Do not let anyone use your loneliness as a key. The next weeks were not dramatic. Real consequences rarely arrive like thunder. They arrive as certified letters, frozen account permissions, canceled forms, attorney calls, recorded notices, repayment schedules, and quiet men in offices saying, "Sign here." Brian's company survived, but not comfortably. The creditors had been paid, but now he owed me under terms he could no longer ignore. Caldwell structured repayment through a lien on business equipment and future receivables. Fair, legal, cold enough to hold. The mail forwarding attempt was reported. The bank kept the fraud flags in place. The guardianship inquiry died before it became a petition. Denise tried once to claim that I had misunderstood her intentions. Caldwell sent her the realtor message, the deleted text, the gate recording, and the mail forwarding request. She stopped writing after that. The trust amendment stood. Brian was no longer successor trustee. Brian was no longer beneficiary. That did not mean I hated him. It meant he could no longer profit from harming me. There is a difference. I updated my estate plan again. The house would remain mine for life. After my death, part of the property value would fund the Elaine Hayes Vocational Scholarship for young men and women entering the building trades. The rest would go toward home repairs for elderly widows and widowers who needed roofs, ramps, safe steps, heat, or working locks. Elaine would have liked that. She believed a house was never just wood and stone. It was shelter, memory, work, dignity, with a roof over it. 3 months later, Brian came by alone. He did not have the gate code anymore, so he pressed the intercom. I saw him on the camera, standing exactly where I had stood that morning. He looked thinner, older. "Dad," he said, "I'm not here for money. I just want to talk." I let him wait. Not to punish him, to remind both of us that access is not automatic after betrayal. Then I opened the gate. We sat on the porch, not inside. Some rooms require trust before entry. Brian told me Denise had moved out, maybe temporarily, maybe forever. He said he had started counseling. He said he had read the guardianship statement again and again, and could not believe he had signed it. I could believe it. That was the problem. He cried once. I did not comfort him the way I would have when he was a boy. I did not put my hand on his shoulder. I listened. When he finished, he asked, "Do you think Mom would hate me?" That question hurt. "No," I said. "Your mother was not built for hate." His face folded. "But she would have held you accountable." He nodded. The wind moved through Elaine's yellow roses. They had come back strong that year. Brian looked toward them. "I used her name to get you to help me," he said. "Yes." That was low. "Yes. I don't know how to fix that." I looked at my hands. Old hands. Scarred hands. Hands that had built his crib, fixed his bicycle, signed his report cards, held his mother's hand while she left this world, and held a phone while my bank told me he had tried to reach into my accounts. "You start by not asking what you can get back," I said. "You start by becoming someone who does not need keys to be trusted near a door." He cried again. This time, I let silence sit with him. Silence can be mercy, too. I did not restore his inheritance. I did not erase the debt. I did not pretend blood cancels betrayal. But I allowed him to come once a month, outside at first. Then later, after time had done some honest work, inside for coffee. Denise never returned to my home. The gate code changed twice more. The deed stayed where it belonged. Elaine's sewing box went back to the bedroom, on the dresser beneath our wedding photograph. Inside it, I placed the blue notebook, a copy of the trust amendment, and one yellow rose pressed between wax paper. Some people might say I was harsh. Maybe. But harsh is locking your father out of his house the morning after he saves you. Harsh is using his grief as evidence. Harsh is touching his wife's things and calling it safekeeping. Harsh is taking his mail, questioning his mind, trying to sell his home, and calling theft care. What I did was not revenge. It was correction. It was a boundary built from every document Elaine saved and every lesson life had carved into me. They thought grief had made me weak. They forgot grief had made me careful. They thought an old man would shout, stumble, and lose control. They forgot old men have survived enough storms to know when to close the windows, sit still, and call the lawyer. And my son, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the man who locked me out the morning after I paid his debts, learned by noon what he should have known all his life. A father's love may open many doors, but once betrayed, his dignity locks the gate.